This is part 2 of Grief and Grieving. My name is Ron Jetter. I hope you've watched the introductory session. It explains what I'll be doing over this 9-part series. Each of them I hope will be about 10 parts. As I mentioned in the intro, what I talk about during the Tasks of Grieving is from the work of J. William Worden. Dr. Worden's classic work, Grief Counseling and Grief Therapy, was really the thing that has helped me understand why I grieve and the way I grieve. Life itself has given me plenty to be grieved about. The first task of grief, as Worden would say, or as I put it, the first bag to pack is the one dealing with coming to terms with the finality of the loss. And I talk about packing bags because grief forces us to go on a journey. We have to leave the place where we are, not physically, but existentially. We can no longer be there because it no longer exists. It has changed. Our life has changed with the death of a loved one or other significant loss. That means we've got to move. Unfortunately, we don't know where we're moving to. We don't yet know what the future will look like. The first task then is coming to terms with the fact that we have to move, that we have lost, and we have to go on. The finality of the loss is at first shock, as Elizabeth Kubler-Ross says. Our mind meets it with denial, but denial doesn't remain. It tends to fade. As I think about packing bags, one of the things that comes to mind is that going through the things of the one I've lost helps me to come to terms with the finality of that loss. Now, I'm a person of faith, being ordained in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and in spite of that, in spite of believing that there will be a reunion someday, that there is some existence beyond this, I will not see my loved ones in this life. There is separation, and I have to face that. I lost my mother and my father about 2 weeks apart. It was devastating. My mother was 90, had a stroke. My father, a year behind, lost his will to live and gave up the ghost, literally. So I have things. As we went through their house, my brother and sister and I each picked out things that were important to us. We couldn't take everything. They had lived in the same house from 1957 to 2014. That's a long time to be in one place. You collect a lot of stuff, and even though you go through it, and even though we went through it, and there was still stuff that was from our childhoods, and we had to go through all of that. Going through the things of the people who have died is part of this first task, the coming to terms with the finality of the loss. For instance, my hat, or this hat of my dad's. I gave this to my dad. I got it from the son of a friend of mine who was serving on the Kentucky. The Kentucky is a submarine. My dad served on a submarine called the Skipjack during World War II. I wanted to have a hat made for him. Sometimes you'll see people, guys like this, they'll have their hats on because they're proud of their military service. I didn't serve, but I was very proud of my dad's service. I'm going to keep the hat. Golf. An avid golfer. Got to have the golf cup, right? My mom loved cribbage. And the day she says, "Here, why don't you take this?" It was the favorite cribbage board that we used at the cabin. And when she says, "Why don't you take this?" Something in the back of my mind said, there's a meaning there. Wake up. It's trying to tell you something that your subconscious is trying to say to you. She's giving this away because you're not going to play cribbage with her again. I didn't listen to it. I find it hard to let go of this. And coin purses. Lots of coin purses. This one is full of nickels, just nickels. I've led a lot of seminars on grief and grieving over the years. And whenever I've found a person who attended named Mary, that Mary has gotten one of Mary's nickels. My mother's name was Mary. These are the things I've kept, the things that help me to hang on to my mom, my dad. I've had to let go of all the others. Other things that people do to come to terms with the finality of the loss are create a special place or a ritual or a shrine. If the person is buried, then there's a place at the cemetery. It's not unusual after the loss of a spouse or a child to go to the cemetery every single day. Gradually then, task 1 is moving along when we know we don't need to go every day. Maybe I can skip a day, maybe a week, maybe it's been 2 weeks, maybe 1 month, but I'll go there every year. I bring my bag of things out every year or when I talk about it with others. But I don't need to see these things. Some people, as I say, build shrines. They may have a picture, a special object belonging to that person. A candle is very common, and then they'll make sure that candle remains lit throughout their period of grieving, or this initial task of coming to terms with the finality of the loss. Others may think it strange. Those who are not grieving, whose world has not stopped, don't understand. Why are you doing that? Well, I would encourage you, don't let others judge your grief. Your grief is your grief. Your journey is yours. What you put in your bags is special to you. And it's important that you have permission to do what you need to do to grieve, to move along, to move from the place that no longer exists toward a place that you can't yet see. If you need a shrine, make the shrine. For my parents who lived 300 miles away, I didn't get to see them. They weren't buried. They had their ashes scattered. I did it myself with my siblings at the family cabin. I get there twice a year. And when I'm there, I go down to the place, the wildflowers and the bushes, where their ashes are now mingled with the rest of the forest floor and the flowers. And I talk to them. Talking to those we've lost is a healthy, common, and normal thing. Again, some people say, that's weird, that's not normal, that's not right. Give yourself permission to do what's right to you, what your gut says you need to do in order to grieve. As long as it's not harmful to you or another person or the environment or another creature, do what you need to do. If you're going to have a candle, make sure it's in a safe place, of course. But take the time you need. There's no timeline on grief. There's no calendar. You can't pull out a stopwatch and say, okay, start grieving. All right, stop. You can't pull out a calendar and say, okay, in 180 days, I'm done. Again, coming to terms with the finality of the loss takes time. Some people say, oh, it can take maybe a year or so. For some less, for some more. But there's no right nor wrong. There's only what's right for you. As you are grieving, do what you need to do to take time to say goodbye. It may involve going through the personal property, the effects, the clothing, and the other items. For my siblings and I, we had a week to clear out the house and put it up for sale. It was a very short time, and we had to have breaks quite often. We would just stop, and each of us would bring about 4 items, and we'd talk about them, and then we'd say, don't need to keep those. But each of us then kept certain items of furniture and certain mementos. As I say, you saw my mementos. I will keep those. I don't know that my children will want them. I don't know what will happen to them. But I think those are the things that I'll keep probably for the rest of my life. As you grieve, take time, build your shrine, visit your place, do what you need to do until you're ready to accept that the loss is real. They aren't coming back. You can still talk to them, but they're not going to talk back. They aren't there. Someday in heaven, in that other place, maybe, but not here, not now.